Good day to all of you. I'm Dr. Shamit Chopra, Head of Department and Director of Patel Hospital. I'm a head and neck surgeon and a microvascular reconstructive surgeon. As part of this lecture series in conceptual surgery, we will start with our series on thyroid and parathyroid glands. As you can imagine, as young surgeons, all of you would want to get a grasp of anatomy and physiology first. So that's what we'll talk about as we start this presentation. So, the thyroid was named after an ancient Grecian shield. Thomas Wharton named it. As you can see, this is fairly basic, but you'll be able to see that there is an isthmus over here. You can see the left lobe, the right lobe. The thyroid overlies the laryngeal framework. So you can see the thyroid cartilage here, the cricoid cartilage here, the thyrohyoid and the cricothyroid membranes, as well as the hyoid bone. The trachea is over here. We'll not go too much into laryngeal anatomy because that is the scope of another surgeon's talk. Dr. Ramandeep Kaur will be talking about the larynx, but we'll focus our attention currently on the thyroid per se. The thyroid develops from an endodermal extension in the floor of the pharynx. It's known as the thyroglossal duct. Broadly speaking, the foramen cecum descends down from the thyroglossal tract. The tract then fuses with the lateral analoges to then form it, and the remnant thyroglossal duct is going to involute. Now, in some patients, in some people, the involution is incomplete. So, as a result, you get a thyroglossal duct cyst, and that is the embryological basis of explanation of this. The parafollicular or the C cells are derived from the neural crest, and that's roughly how the thyroid is going to develop. The thyroid, of course, as we talked about, is placed anteriorly in the lower neck. It extends from the fifth cervical to T1 vertebra, and that's variable, of course. It is ensheathed by the pretracheal layer of the deep cervical fascia and consists, like we talked already, about the right and left lobe. They are connected by an isthmus. The isthmus may be hypoplastic or it may be well developed. The weight of the thyroid gland is about 25 grams. It's slightly heavier in females, and during menstruation and pregnancy, because of the increased blood flow and the altered hemodynamic state, it usually enlarges. Again, another vignette on anatomy of thyroid. On the right, you see a cadaveric picture, and on the left, you see a picture of the vascular anatomy. So you can see here that the superior thyroid artery is leading down from this part and is going along the superior pole to anastomose with the vessels on the opposite side. The same superior thyroid artery is also going to give branches to the larynx. Here you see the median thyroid vein, which is usually the inferior, but sometimes there is a thyroidia ema artery that extends superiorly. The inferior thyroid artery, of course, enters the thyroid gland in its lower aspect, and usually will extend to be able to be over there, so that we are able to visualize the venous ramifications as well as the arterial branching that goes about. Here you can see in the cadaveric picture, of course, it's not possible to appreciate the smaller vessels, but you can see the common carotid artery on the right side, the one on the left side. The thyroid gland is housed in between, and you have the trachea over here, and the innominate arteries are going to be below this. So this roughly is an idea about the gland itself and the vascular territories that supply it. The thyroid, as we talked about, the lobes of the thyroid, if we talk about the shape, are approximately conical. Each lobe is about 5 by 3 by 2 centimeters in dimension, and this is important. When you do your ultrasounds and when you look at your thyroid pathology, you should know whether or not you are dealing with an increased size of the thyroid gland or not. Not just the radiologist, but you should be able to appreciate that as well. Some pictures of specimens that have been removed. Here you are seeing an important structure which is called the pyramidal lobe. Normally it's left paramedian in location. The pyramidal lobe typically will be extending as an upward invagination, and some people state that it's a remnant of the thyroglossal duct or a failure or a partial failure of involution. It is found variably in about 30 to 50% of individuals, and whenever you do a left hemithyroidectomy, it's important to note that the pyramidal lobe should be leading up from that to make sure that you are able to do a complete hemithyroidectomy. Very often in my practice, I would follow up this invagination at least till the level of the notch of the thyroid cartilage, if not the hyoid bone, to be able to make sure that we are able to remove the entire thyroid. Why is this relevant? In thyroid cancer, you want to make sure that you remove all of the macroscopic thyroid tissue as possible to be able to make sure that radioactive iodine, if indicated, or thyroglobulin as indicated in the postoperative follow-up, is able to represent the disease status to its full ability. In that respect, the ligament of Berry, the pyramidal lobe, the area behind the superior pole needs to be thoroughly cleared to be able to make sure you have a complete macroscopic thyroidectomy. Again, the pyramidal lobe is diagrammatically represented in this picture. We've already talked about the extensions and the deep cervical fascia that forms an invagination of the thyroid gland. Here is a cross-sectional view or an axial view, again a diagrammatic representation which can show you that the thyroid has the parathyroid in the posterior aspect. Here is the carotid sheath which harbors the vagus, the common carotid artery and the internal jugular vein, and of course this would be the prevertebral fascia. It is covered on its part by the muscles. In the midline you are going to have the strap muscles and laterally you are going to have the sternocleidomastoid. There are surfaces and relations, and of course as you read this presentation you will be able to read all that. The lateral surface is covered by the sternothyroid, which is the deeper strap muscle. Superficial to the sternothyroid you have the sternohyoid. More anteriorly the sternohyoid, as we talked about, and the superior belly of omohyoid cover the thyroid. The superior belly of omohyoid is typically not encountered in the thyroid, which is not very grossly enlarged in size, but in grossly enlarged thyroids it ends up being a landmark that you need to trace in that respect. The superior laryngeal nerve has an external branch which is medial to this part of the gland as it passes to supply the cricothyroid muscle. The cricothyroid muscle is the tensor of the vocal fold, and that is the area where we are concerned about. And the posterior border is related below to the inferior thyroid artery, as we talked about. The lower part of the posterior border on the left side ends in the thoracic duct. The thoracic duct starts at the level of T12 at the cisterna chyli, crosses over from the right side to the left at the level of T5. How it is relevant to the thyroid? Because it's going to loop in the left side of the neck and is going to join the junction of the internal jugular and the subclavian veins.